Put the hammer down. I'd like to bring this meeting of Southern Shores Planning Board to order, July 15, 2024. If you will please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Robert McClennan's going to be about a half hour late. He's stuck in traffic on Roanoke Island Bridge, so we'll proceed on without him for a while. Let's see, approval of agenda. Could I get a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I motion to approve tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Jan, and I'll second that. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, none. Ooh, election of officers. Well, what do we do? Open the floor for nominations?
Yes, sir. Nominations for chair, vote, motion, second, vote. Nomination for vice chair, same thing.
Okay, well, I will do just that. I will open the floor for the chairman first of planning board. Entertain anybody.
I nominate Andy Ward.
Well, I appreciate that, Charlie. Any other nominations?
Works for me.
Okay, well, we'll take a vote on that. All in favor of me continuing on for another year, say, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you for your confidence. And I will open the floor now for vice chair of the planning board. And I would like to nominate Tony DiBernardo for that position.
Second.
Any other nominations? All in favor of Tony remaining as vice chair, say aye. Aye. Opposed, none. Okay. We will move on to approval of May 20th, 2024 amendments. Anybody want to jump into any amendments?
Can I make a couple suggestions?
Yeah.
I wasn't here, so I could do this with
Yeah, but I mean,
complete.
that doesn't matter.
On page 3, in paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This paragraph says Part 2, Section 36-57 definitions. The second sentence, Planning Director Haskett stated that comes from the flood damage prevention ordinance. The previous thing is talking about this additional definition. I think you mean that language or that wording or something like that, because it's a little ambiguous what Wes is talking about in that sentence. You see what I'm saying?
What line was that, Charlie?
My copy doesn't have lines. Maybe that one.
99.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it's a different, the one that was.
Because if you printed it off at home, it didn't.
I see. All right. I printed it
Yeah,
off.
I've had that.
Wait a minute. Let me correspond to
We-
that. I'll show you what. I'm sorry. I did print it off at home. You wouldn't want me to read it here. La.
Still page 390, line 99. Is that what we?
Yeah, exactly. Line 99.
Yeah.
I think you need a noun after that.
Uh-huh.
That wording, something like that.
Okay.
Or that language or something. And then just two other little typos on page 6. Line 208.
Yeah.
I think it's ratio, not
Yeah.
ration. And that same typo is in 232.
Yep, I had both of those.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I got ahead of myself.
And while we're on that page, line 227, I feel like that needs to read, Chairperson Ward stated the volume that the board is trying to regulate on a piece of property
Yes.
rather than put.
Yes.
If I may, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Reese, going back, I've got those suggestions. Going back to page 3, line 99, I would suggest using the word term. So it states that planning director Haskett stated that term comes from the flood damage protection.
That's fine. That's fine. I just need a noun. Right. Fine. As I said, I wasn't going to hear, so I'm
Gotcha.
reluctant to offer substantive suggestions.
I had one on page 7, line 274. At the beginning of the standard, we'll read, that probably needs to be in quotes
Yeah.
to the end of that paragraph. And I had one on page 9 as well, line 374. Rather than how do you say, I would suggest that that first word should be tell instead of say. So the sentence would read, how do you tell that person that you can only use blah, blah, blah. Everybody see that?
Mhm.
Then on 385, same page, although it could be exasperated, it should be exacerbated.
Yes.
And then for me, finally, on page 412, planning board member, there's no member there, but it's McClendon on line 412. That was it for me. Anybody else have any additions, subtractions to that? All right. In that case, I will move that we approve the minutes as corrected for May 20th, 2024. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, none? All right. Okay. See, 2 members of the public sitting out here. Either of you wish to speak to us before we get moving in the direction?
We'll wait, I guess we're waiting for you to get to what we're gonna be addressing first.
Well, that's going to be up to Planning Director Haskett, but
I guess planning director would speak first and then we get to speak.
actually,
It works like that.
no, I mean, you know, we're equal opportunity here, so, but it actually, in the order of things, we are going to conduct old business first, which is accessory dwelling units, and that may take a little bit of time, and then we will go into the new business, which is the ZTA. So if you want to speak to accessory dwelling or the new business, now's the time. Or you can wait till we're done.
wait till everything's done.
Is that your choice? Okay. Just,
I'll go first. Go ahead. So, okay? Go ahead.
yeah.
You
Speak.
wrote your name, no, you wrote your name in, go ahead.
No, come to the podium and state your name, and we're all ears.
Get my notes. Afternoon. My name is Richard Filling. I live at 131 Crooked Back Loop in Chickahook. Let's see. In regard to the new business on ZTA 24-04 and 02, regarding the tree removal bill and so forth. The requirements that are in place to keep from cutting or safeguarding those trees that are in the setback zone. We need some language from the town staff or planning department that would determine which trees can or cannot be cut. Where would it be for me to come in? I mean, I think we're taking the right step forward. Don't get me wrong. I think this is an excellent second step, I think, at this point, that I come in and apply for a permit. Okay, I'm going to cut every tree that's in the setback. There's no real language in there that says that you can or can't. It's simply, I'm going to apply for a permit, and if you give me a permit, then I'm going to take them all down. We need something. The contractor should be responsible to identify which ones he's going to cut and or leave. And then the planning department, in turn, should have that responsibility of reviewing that and saying, no, you cannot cut this, in lieu of, don't get me wrong, I suspect that that's the real intent, that the planning department will make that review and approval and so forth, but it doesn't appear that way. And I don't want a contractor to make that assumption that he can simply come in and clear cut, as what is occurring now, and you all know that. So the bottom line is that we need, there should be some stipulation on removal of trees. Can I expand upon that? And if this isn't the right time or place, let me know. Can I expand upon that in regard to sediment control and stormwater management?
I'll let you go a little bit beyond the allotted 3 minutes. If that thing goes off, I might ask Wes to shut it off.
Whoops, I'm
But
down to
technically,
4. Okay,
3 minutes per comment.
okay. Under section 36-171, and then there's subject to the requirements of GS 160A 417B, that the zoning administration shall hereby authorize to include requirements in the permit which minimize the disturbance or damage of any adjacent lots included. We need some language in there that should say, including sediment control practices, just not best management practices. Now, understanding that under 2404, and then that follows with section 36-171 for lot disturbance and stormwater management, which is 1 acre. 1 acre, that's a lot of property. And then, of course, it falls under the guidelines of GS 113A-57. That's where the 1 acre falls into place. Again, I'd like to request that we relook at that subsection and require some type of sediment control criteria and language above and beyond the 1 acre, if you have a quarter acre, a half acre, you should not be allowed to strip that entire lot. And that's occurring. I'll leave it at that.
Well, appreciate your comments, and believe me, we're all trying to get it right as
Oh,
much as possible.
I know that completely, and I understand that, and I really appreciate everything that you're doing. Especially with Wes and his office, everything that they're trying to do regarding the tree.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it a tree bill, but the amendment to that section to really kind of control some of the tree clearing that's occurring. And I know that that's what's occurring, or that's what you're trying to accomplish.
Right. Well, if I can make a suggestion to you, put your words to us and copy town council on, what you're telling us tonight. And, they'll have it in writing, we'll have it in writing, and we can act accordingly.
I can do that.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much. Thank you. Mike? Same deal. You can run over a little bit, but don't abuse us.
How about if I keep it short?
Well, that would be even better.
Okay. Fortunately, I didn't see this until today, this afternoon, so I don't have anything truly prepared. As far as the commercial,
Name and address first.
Mike Stone, 8 Sanfilla Court, Southern Shores. As far as the commercial plan use development, that has always been a right. It's my understanding now that somewhere someone scribbled in on one area that it was a special use and another area that it said it was a permitted use. It has always been a permitted use, the same as you had planned unit developments all throughout Southern Shores, including across from Duck Woods on property that's still sitting vacant and all the commercial areas. I mean, I have maps where it shows a large section going all the way from Kitty Hawk School all the way down to Duck Woods, which was multifamily or single family. You could put in whichever one you wanted to at one point. But it has always been a permitted use in commercial. And I consider that downgrading of my property here. And that's as simple as it is. I think it should remain a permitted use. Because I look at it, when you get into a special use, someone can always say, well, I don't want something. I don't want anybody to develop their property. I've seen enough people like it. I've lived here for 54 years, and I've listened to people come in and say, how dare you let someone build on my street? How dare you let someone build next to me? I mean, you got people that coming from different areas, this, that, and the others. Some are hell-bent on having every kind of rule there is and telling somebody what they're going to do with their property. That's wrong. I mean, he doesn't like clear cutting. Some other people might want to cut and put what vegetation they want on there. I lived in the woods for a lot of time. I moved out of the woods because it was like doom and gloom living back in the woods, even though I lived on the golf course and had that bit of open space. I mean, if someone wants to be doom and gloom and tell somebody what to do, I don't want to hear from them. And so I guess that's leading into the tree cutting. I disagree with what's here as far as tree cutting in the setback area. I see some people coming along saying, you don't get to cut excuse my language, thing down in that setback area. There's a lot of properties that look pretty hideous because of all the trees on their property. And some people might like to rake leaves, some don't. And some like to cut grass. I don't. So I kind of go with the happy medium. I mean, I left vegetation on my property when I built my house that I'm still living in. But you remove what you need to make the property work best for you. And I don't think there should be restrictions to the most part as to what can be done. I don't believe in, you can't remove trees from the 20 feet or 25 feet in front of your house. That's your front yard. How are you going to have a nice front yard if you've got all these huge trees? The second thing is, it's a liability. I cannot count how many dead men or branches that have broken off and landed close by me. In this case, 6 feet from me this year. If it hit me, it would have killed me. There's a lot of people killed by branches falling out of trees. I mean, I have some, the Westlers in Raleigh, their neighbor, top of pine tree broke off, came straight down through his roof. The man living there, it spiked 3 feet from him where he was sitting in a chair. There's kids and people killed all day long by trees, even the ones that don't look like they're dangerous. I mean, I glanced online before I came over here. A woman was killed. Tree that the city inspected in a park, no problem. Branch broke off of it, split off of it, and killed it. Trees are dangerous. This town, when it was developed, if any of you can remember, you could go to Hillcrest Overlook. You could see Manio. The tops of the trees were 8 feet below the top of the Hillcrest Overlook. And look where they are now. I mean, the trees are too high. They're too dangerous. So if someone chooses to cut off and maintain smaller trees, I believe they should be allowed to do it because you got a lot of old trees, a lot of dead men, and someone's going to get hurt. I'm surprised it hadn't happened yet. I worry about it every time I drive down Dogwood Trail, including the ones that are leaning. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Okay. Well, we'll welcome Robert. That was a quick trip from Roanoke Island to here. Weren't speeding, were you?
Unfortunately, I didn't know about that zoning in commercial trees because I do not agree with that either.
We got your drift, and believe me, we're going to talk about it. But appreciate you coming up. Okay, now that Robert's here, we'll slide right into old business, which is continued discussion of accessory structures with living space and accessory dwelling units above, or just accessory dwelling units in general. Wes has sent us the blog from Adam Lovelady at the Institute of Government in Chapel Hill. We had looked at that previously about a year and a half ago, and I think it's an excellent read on the current state of accessory dwelling units in North Carolina, except nothing has been decided in the Senate or the House bill. So even though it's published 2+ years ago, I think what I got out of it was basically that we can't register any accessory dwelling unit. It's been struck down by the courts, and it doesn't allow a municipality to force the registration of an accessory dwelling unit. Beyond that, it goes on to read about the statutory limits of the different programs, inspections, permits, and registration. The IPR programs speaks to the Vacation Rental Act. But on page 4, at the bottom of that first paragraph, to me, it sums up, and he goes on, but that sums up pretty much where we're at with what we can and can't do with the registration. It says the key statutory language now states that local governments may not require any owner or manager of rental property to obtain any permit or permission under Article 11 or 12 to lease or rent residential property or to register rental property with the local government. Pretty cut and dry.
I think the distinction though that it speaks to is that you can designate short-term rental as a use and require zoning permit as long as it's beyond just a simple registration program. And I think for me, it goes back to the discussion about ADUs and whether or not localities can restrict ADUs from being used as short-term rentals. And I think based on this, I think you can. I think what you would have to do is perhaps say for the definition of, let's say, single-family dwelling, you could, in that term, in that definition, indicate that a single-family dwelling included short, long-term occupancy, so you don't regulate those any differently, but that you could also come up with separate uses and terms for, detached accessory dwelling, long-term housing, or detached accessory dwelling, short-term rental. And either prohibit both, prohibit one, allow one. You could allow them in certain districts and not in other districts. And, for me, I think it at least gives an avenue. I mean, I think my perspective is, and I was going to save this to the end, but I did go to the council's last meeting, and as the board asked and indicated, our discussion, and that we would encourage them to pursue some type of study of affordable housing. It was not on their agenda beyond my report, so they didn't really give direction or indicate a preference one way or the other. But I do believe Councilman Neal did indicate that, at some point we should have a conversation about ADUs. So I would hope that with respect to short-term rental regulation, ADU regulation, perhaps we see whether council wants to more holistically look at affordable housing and how these fit in and the regulation of them may fit in. But that's kind of my takeaway from reading this.
Anybody else want to jump in on their reading of both of those ones? I had the shorter one that I wanted Wes to show. It did have some language in there about Senate Bill 374 or House Bill 409. But, yeah, Charlie.
This was in 2023, and as you mentioned at the outset, neither of these bills moved forward.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know why these bills didn't move forward? What the intention of the House and Senate leadership is with respect to these bills for the forthcoming session? I mean, there is on one side, if the state is going to preempt all town regulation of ADUs, we might bemoan that, but it may not be worth a great effort to develop our own unique and special ADU policy. On the other hand, as you point out, I mean, it could be that there is scope even in the aftermath of this Wilmington case for doing that using the zoning authority. But I guess what I didn't understand is that the links between the two things. If you use zoning authority, is it still nonetheless going to be preempted by the legislation under consideration in Raleigh? Or is it just too difficult for Raleigh to act and they're not likely to act, in which case we ought to essentially take the temperature of the town and figure out whether there's something to do?
Well, I was telling Wes earlier today when I went in and picked up my packet, I have a little inside help on some of this stuff by a first cousin of mine that happens to be kind of a guru at the Institute of Government on zoning. David Owens. And I've talked to David at length about this from the very first time we got involved in 2021, I think it was. Planning board and town started working on some kind of language, but basically what he told me yesterday was that the legislature isn't going to move on this year. I mean, it'll be a very slim chance because the session's over. I mean, they go back and forth as needed, but this is low priority for this year's session. And he also seems to think that there's not a real appetite for it in suburban areas in the state because people want to be able to control their own density. And a lot of the suburban areas in the state have accessory dwelling units, and people aren't satisfied. And he seems to think that just because there's bipartisan support for these two bills that have been floating around for 2.5 years, he said when it comes time to vote, don't expect it to be the same. So he's not saying that it won't pass, but he seems relatively certain it won't be in this session, and it will be watered down considerably if it makes it to a whole nother House bill and a whole nother Senate bill, because it's changed numbers already in some language.
When you say watered down, you mean preserving some capacity for towns
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
adopt their own legislation, their own regulation.
And I'm of the opinion that this board needs to come up with a few recommendations that Wes can beat into a ZTA that addresses, I mean, we don't have anything on the books right now.
Right.
I mean, I don't think we need to say, oh, we're not going to allow them. But we have to, within reason, be able to at least put something out there. And if we have to delete or change or reconfigure, we've done it before. I mean, we can put a ZTA before town council. They can modify it, and hopefully we get some language that addresses how we would like to see ADUs progress in the town.
So, but the implication of the Wilmington case is that you can't put a ceiling through registration or any
Right.
other technique. You can't essentially put a ceiling on ADUs.
Mhm.
And the implication might actually be you can't ban them altogether, but you can regulate them through zoning.
Well, but we're two different animals though, because
Right.
there's ADUs. And
then
then
there's
short-term rentals.
Short-term
Right.
rentals, right.
So the Wilmington case was on short-term rentals, and I
You
think
would, right, you're right.
technically you could prohibit them as a land use.
Right, I stand corrected,
yeah.
although this town certainly has a lot of short-term rentals.
Yeah, that would be
Part of
problematic.
the economics
Yeah.
of the town.
But
Well, there's also some forefront going on as one of the points to address in some communities, that, like we spoke last time about a percentage of having ADUs, like they wanted like 1% in a
Yeah.
certain area. I mean, but these are just talking points
Mhm.
that we need like 8 or 9 bullets and then just, dwell into them to see what we can do that would keep the complexity of our community that we have and preserve it so
Mhm.
that it doesn't become more transient, that we, have a large
Right.
number of short-term rentals that are ADUs.
well, the gist of what I got a year and a half ago, and I reread it again this time from School of Government, is in the Wilmington case, they didn't allow for short-term rentals to be regulated by a requirement to show proof of registration anywhere. So I think the takeaway from that is we can't require any short-term rental, accessory dwelling unit, whatever you want to call it. We can't require that to occur. And Michael said that he helped craft the registration process in Nags Head. I think it was $25. I mean, it was just basically for the town of Nags Head to know who these people are and, basically if they're operating okay. And
So if we
Bloomington
can-
case said, that you can't require that.
But
If
you
we-
could, sorry, go ahead.
No, and again, along that line of percentage, if we can't regulate using a short-term rental or an ADU as a short-term rental, we can regulate the number of them, like you said previously, on a street versus seeing 15 and all these residential with them. Limit the number so that it becomes more aesthetic looking and, or is aesthetic looking.
Well, I think you could, in zoning, you could say, we could say that an accessory dwelling unit, regardless of the length of tenancy, requires a special use permit. You could say that an accessory dwelling unit to be used as a short-term rental requires a special use permit. You could say that an accessory dwelling unit used as a short-term rental is a prohibited use. You could come up with a zoning district that established where they might be palatable, where they wouldn't be palatable. So I think there are a variety of options, and I think on the legislative side, it's not without precedence that, and I don't know that they would do it in this case, that the General Assembly would create a effective date where regulations that were adopted prior to a certain date could stand. I don't know that they would do it in this case. The current version of the legislation would not do that. And like I said, I don't know that they would do that in this case. I mean, my perspective is, in a lot of ways, you should be able to build an ADU in the same location that you should be able to build any accessory structure. Because ultimately, if we don't have an issue with the structure, the only thing we're really talking about is whether or not the use is more impactful than the structure. And, I frankly don't, absent some extreme examples, I don't think that it is more impactful. I've said that I think we should allow for ADUs as an option for people for affordable housing, as long as they're restricted for short-term rental tenancy. And maybe there's some areas where that should be allowed, but I think in large part, our residential subdivisions, if you want an ADU and want to allow for it to be occupied for on a long-term basis, I don't see any issue with that.
If we have no limits, then do we tax our systems, our police and our fire? I mean, if we have, say, twice the number of units and we have to accommodate, situations, are we now looking at, a scope a little bit bigger for the infrastructure?
Well, I say hypothetically no, because the occupancy of that parcel from the number of people can't exceed what it could if it were a single-family home because of the septic limits.
But that's not the case.
Well, I know that's not the case, but that doesn't mean it's right. I mean, they still can't exceed the occupancy. They're in violation of health department regulations if they're doing that.
Yeah, that would be checked at, the building inspector's point. Lovelady says on page 9, the last paragraph on page 9, the general idea of a cap on a particular use is interesting. And I'm not quite sure that we want to go down that road of capping how many ADUs you can have per zoning regulations. I think that's a pretty difficult ask.
My impression was the only way you might limit the number would be, you could say perhaps that you can't have one closer than 500 feet from another one. You can, but you can't like put a number.
I think they nixed that, didn't they? I mean.
Well, they were saying that, just like in a zoning district, we can say that you can't build, you can't have one use X number of feet from a church or a school, that those kinds of limitations are allowed. But I'm not sure how we would employ
Yeah,
that on
but
an ADU.
it would be very impractical to try to create different zoning uses in Southern Shores.
I think the first discussion is whether or not the town wants to allow ADUs. We don't currently.
Well, we do for all intents and purposes.
No, we don't. We do not. We don't allow you to do all of the things that you're supposed to be able to do in an ADU. People skirt it, people jump around, and they,
I'm gonna get Wes to, can you pull up a couple of things for us, Wes?
Yes, sir.
Can you pull up I think it was the advertisement for Airbnb that I sent you? What do you call that, Robert?
it's technically not an ADU.
Wow.
Because they don't have a place to cook. Well,
They
it's
don't?
continued.
How do you know that?
Well, they probably, I don't know if they do or they don't. When they got their building permit, they said that that's not what they were doing.
Right.
And that's all the town can do unless there's some other reason to go in.
Yeah. And
I'm just saying, they've gotten around
See the-
something.
see the
town does
disclaimer?
not. Mhm. Well, I'm just saying, the town does not allow those. That is not a permitted use. People get around it, yes, but I'm saying if we're gonna talk about ADUs, let's talk about if we're gonna let them.
Well,
permit them.
and I'm saying that the notion that you can have a bedroom and not a cooking facility, or have a cooking facility and not a bedroom, and that's determinative of it being an accessory dwelling unit, to me, that's ridiculous. We either
That's
say,
the law.
I'm with you, we either say, we want them, let's
That's right.
go ahead and
Allow
put
it.
them in, yeah. And we're, dancing around something that is happening quite often, that, people, if we're letting people do just what that advertisement says, and the only thing stopping them is plugging in a stove,
Mhm.
to me, it's, they should be able to do what they want to in there and call it an accessory dwelling unit.
I would rather, I agree. I would rather it be permitted correctly, inspected correctly, and not an after the fact thing. If the town decides, yeah, we're gonna get on board with ADUs. Why do we want to get on board with ADUs? Is that something we want to require them to have long-term leases? Is that an appropriate use?
I don't think that would pass muster, to be able to, tell Mr. Stone that half of his properties got to be long-term rentals instead of short-term rentals. I don't think that that's the business we need to be in, dictating how it's used.
Well, the ADU,
For
I think so.
ADU, we certainly could.
Yeah.
Not
Not a whole
not the
house.
primary residence.
That's an accessory dwelling unit.
Sure.
Okay.
But that's in a location where I don't know how much occupancy they get of that thing as a short-term rental, but
I do, go look on their calendar.
yeah. I mean, frankly, given the location of it, if that were used for housing, long-term housing, that would be a better outcome than being
Well-
used for short-term rental.
Yeah, but that's,
But there's no
yeah,
kitchen.
that's
If there were,
aspirational.
If there were.
That's aspirational, that, oh yeah, we'd love for it to be long-term
Mhm.
housing, it would help for affordable housing.
Sure.
Well, those people can make more money doing it by the day or the week. than
Not
they
if it's
can long-term.
illegal.
Well, why keep it illegal? Why not make it legal? That's all I'm saying.
I mean,
Believe me,
Well, currently the town doesn't allow ADUs technically. And so if we were going to allow ADUs, we can put in the zoning that it's a special use and that special use maybe requires a long-term lease,
I
longer than
think it
6
would,
months.
I think it would not be in special use, it would be in permitted uses. I don't see, go through the special use process every time somebody wants to turn a garage apartment into an accessory dwelling unit.
I mean, if we're trying to mitigate for concerns, I mean, I think we've heard from other members that, and it would be my perspective that this use in this location, in this neighborhood is going to be more disruptive as a short-term rental than it would be a long-term rental.
I absolutely agree, and that's, Wes, if you can pull up the actual picture of that with the site plan.
For your doing, can I ask a real quick question? Is that or is that not a permitted use? Yes or no? I want to know.
That's the zoning administrator.
Wes, is that or is that not a permitted use as it's sitting there today?
It's a permitted use.
It is, okay. Thank you.
It's technically not an ADU.
Gotcha.
Can,
I understand.
okay, can you blow it up just a little bit more where we can see the dimensions, distance from, on the setbacks? Yep. Okay, everybody see where the tiny house is. How about that? We'll call it a tiny house right now, but it's
It's an accessory structure.
from the side setback and from the street setback is, the street setback is 27.6 feet. They're just back behind the setback. On the sideline, 26.7, 27.7. So and I'm digressing a little bit here, but what the legislature in those two, the House bill and the Senate bill, they are proposing that same accessory dwelling unit, or excuse me, tiny house that we're looking at can be either, one says 5 feet from the setback, and they don't specify side, front, or rear. They just say setback in both of those bills. One says 5 and one says 10. Could you imagine that thing can slide over 5 feet away from, the next door and 5 feet away from the street? It's ridiculous. But anyway, they complied. That same picture, if you've got it, Wes. Oh, I don't know. You can't go distance from the house. Is there any scale on that?
What are these things?
Let's see, 130 feet measured.
This was the house.
It's 130.6 feet from the front property line to this corner of the house. So then if you subtract 130.6 from the 27.6.
Yeah, about 100 feet away from the house. It's a lot. And people in that neighborhood comment on it. It's a cute little house or what have you, but it's 100 feet away from the main house, painted completely different color, which, I mean, that's something that we can't regulate, but in spite of it being a really cute little house and creating income for the people, would you want to see 10 of those down Beech Tree? I wouldn't.
I mean, I think the problem is they could do it regardless of what the use was today.
Well, I would prefer to allow ADUs to exist and be able to regulate, and we can regulate, according to David Owens, how far that tiny house, accessory dwelling unit, whatever we're going to call it, how far that sits from the house. You can zone that. And looking at both the Senate and the House bills, you can zone that.
Can I ask you a question though?
Yeah.
What's the rationale for that?
To keep it-
But let me explain. So that one there is a ADU for all intents and
Yeah, yeah.
purposes. That one there is a children's playhouse.
Exactly. Well,
I'm just saying.
but what
So-
is it, what do they call it on the permit, Wes? I think I got it here. I think they call that a studio.
It was called a
Right.
studio and something else. I can't remember.
Okay,
But you're exactly right.
so what, would we be imposing that requirement on all accessory structures or just ones used as ADUs?
I think it would, you could, according to David Owens, you could impose any living accessory dwelling unit with living space. You
can.
could zone it so that that building, that cute little house would sit closer to the house and be more of a part of the house and blend in aesthetically with the neighborhood rather than have that thing sticking out. And if the legislature has their way, it's either going to be 5 feet or 10 feet side yard setback potentially. And they may say, oh, you can bring it within 5 or 10 feet of the front and rear setback.
But I guess my question is, what's the rationale for that over and above any accessory structure?
Aesthetics, I think, and compatibility with the neighborhood.
But that would apply to any accessory structure, not just ones that are used for ADUs. And my point is this: I don't know that we should be advancing regulations that are more punitive on an accessory dwelling unit than they are on any other accessory structure. If the concern is aesthetics and character, well, then that should apply to any structure that anyone could put out there regardless of what they're going to use it for.
True.
So to answer your question, you can't put a playhouse out by the road either. If you're gonna have a playhouse or a studio or whatever you're gonna use it for, it needs to have some proximity to the primary structure.
I wouldn't have a problem with regulating all accessory structures. But according to David, you can regulate accessory structures with living space, which becomes an ADU.
And there's communities that have done that,
Hmm.
where you can't have a structure in front of the house, even fencing.
Right.
Fencing had to go, on the edge of the house and back, it can't be forward. So, I mean, those are things that have been,
Now, we're behind the curve on, having any kind of covenant that would take care of that. I mean, Chickahawk's a different beast. They've got a covenant and they're fighting a different battle over there. But
So,
Yeah,
so
I think-
you theoretically might support, ADUs in the town, but you'd like to see some restriction as far as proximity to the primary structure.
that would be one thing.
Okay. Anybody have any other things that they would like to see if we were to move down the path of ADU legitimacy?
I would like to start off with saying we need to define accessory dwelling unit. We've got this hodgepodge of definitions that you take one and put it in front of the other and back. The Wes, if you pull up the definition of building accessory, and then I think we had some definitions a while back for, what were they? Yeah, the definition of bedroom, definition of building, definition of dwelling unit. Okay, there's building accessory building.
How do you determine, the main house is a 4-bedroom house, and they say, well, we're going to use the bedroom as a study, and we're going to put the 4th bedroom outside in an ADU?
I think that's what was done with that example we're looking at. And I believe on the permit, they had to list 4 more occupants. I'm not sure. I've got that permit somewhere. But anyway, it's at the building inspection department where they look at the thing and say, okay, this is a studio. And that was a question I had in my head too, was, what if they say it's a workshop with a toilet and a sink and, it's plumbed for that? Wes, I think I'm hearing what Jan's saying. When you come in to get a permit for a studio, was that qualified as a potential bedroom when it was permitted?
The plans show a sleeping space in there, yes, sir.
Yeah, it was living space.
Showed everything except the stove oven.
If I'm not mistaken, I think the legislature last year required us to take an individual's building plans at face value. If they said they were going to have however many studies, workout rooms, whatever, if there was even if there was an adjacent bathroom, you have to call it a study. We, as a municipality, we can't second guess people and say, oh, you could use that as a bedroom.
Yeah.
We have to take their word for it.
I think for permitting purposes here, it is, the description of work is, it's an office studio. That's what that,
Okay, and now you have, let's say, they get a long-term renter, and they, add the address. So there's A and B to the property, and we have the mail now being delivered.
I think that's already the case. It is A and B over there.
So, and then, the question is again, if there isn't some type of consensus as to where we want this to go, there could be an extreme number of these, and again, you're going back to, our infrastructure as far as.
Well, it will be more and more, for sure. It's, as a town, do we move with them or move against them? I feel like we need to slowly move with them, because eventually the legislature is going to say, you have to let them occur. Both of those bills say just that. You have to let them occur.
So again, do we have to let all of them occur, or can we
Well-
limit the number that are allowed? And then also, when the permitting process is started and they bring plans, we can look up the original plans to see that it was a 4-bedroom house. And in other words,
Sure.
and again, we can't be, or put it on Wes or anybody in that department to make the determined decision, but I would think consciously there has to be a right and a wrong.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the permit for septic on that particular example. It says the septic cap on the number of persons is 4. So they had, per their septic permit, I'm assuming, Wes, when Kevin went back and looked at the septic permit, what it was sized for, they had room for 4 more people on the septic capacity.
I can't remember if that was the existing capacity or if they had to provide a new system. I don't recall what was on the health department permit.
What would that mean? What I'm reading right here, it says septic capacity, number of persons, 4.
So that would be for that structure then, because obviously the house is more than 4.
Yeah. So I think it's controlled by the building inspector. Yeah, Charlie.
It just seemed we started talking about ADUs that were used as short-term rentals. And this discussion we've been having is about ADUs anyway, whether they're short-term or long-term rentals. And from a public policy standpoint, there are actually distinctions between the two. From the short-term rental, obviously, we have a lot of short-term rentals in Southern Shores. Whole houses are rented by the week or even less than the week. And then we have a public policy interest in having affordable housing, which could be a long-term rental of an ADU type structure. And then we have an aesthetic, which we've been talking about most recently. So should there be some aesthetic restrictions that are consistent with the town's history and the town's low density objectives? They're really different. And we have to sort of figure out what's our public policy objective and develop, if we feel we need to, zoning approaches to meet that objective. Because you really, what you might want to do for each one of those things is different.
Yeah, no, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. We're looking at three different considerations. Realistically, I think limiting an accessory dwelling unit to long-term might not fly with the state. The
Well, it
aesthetics.
does
is-
seem inconsistent with what
Yeah.
Wilmington was supposed to be doing. So we can't do that
Right.
probably,
Yeah.
unless we did it in some different way.
Mhm. And then the aesthetics is pretty easy. I mean, it's basically what we're seeing is, the proximity of that
Setback. all
to
that.
the-
Yeah, right.
I hate to even start this out.
Now, go ahead, one time.
It's a second structure on the property, being the second livable structure on the property, and you take it to the town and discuss. There's two livable buildings on the property that are not attached. At that point, you designate that the square footage that is lot coverage changes. That is required.
Yeah, well, and that would also be a function of the building inspector to check that on plan review.
But that's how it's a study, it's this, that.
Yeah.
Once it becomes sleeping quarters, then the minimum lot coverage kicks in. And then when you have one of these issues, if it's not attached, if it goes over that lot coverage, they have to remove the use.
Makes sense.
It's a cycle.
Um,
I mean, I could put it on my house relative to one 25, 27 square foot lot.
Yeah.
That's correct.
A lot of the lots are large like that, so.
But that's what we want. That's what we
Yeah.
always want.
Well, I think when you read the first sentence of both of these bills, it says, pertaining to accessory dwelling units, it says a local government shall, repeat, shall allow the development of at least one accessory dwelling unit which conforms to North Carolina Residential Code for 1 and 2 bedroom setup. So they're going to make us do it eventually. Right now, we could say no. As a town, we're not going to allow accessory dwelling units. We'll keep doing what we're doing, which is to basically wink, wink, nod, nod, allow accessory dwelling units. Because it's happening all over the place. And these people are legitimate. They advertise on Airbnb and they're making extra income, and we shouldn't begrudge them for doing that.
I mean, can you pull up, is there a definition for household or family?
I think there's a definition of family.
Yeah.
And can you go to definition of dwelling or dwelling unit?
What?
Persons.
I mean, I don't know that they're not in violation by renting it out, honestly, in my opinion. I mean, they essentially have two dwellings on one lot.
Per the definition, they're not both dwelling units.
But they have multiple families occupying multiple structures.
I disagree.
I hear you. I understand.
All members are related by blood or marriage, or that the dwelling unit is being used as a vacation rental.
Right, so we allow for single-family dwellings. And you allow for an accessory structure. You allow for a single-family dwelling because it's principally occupied by one household, but they've got two separate households, two separate families occupying two separate structures on one lot.
The reason for the whole accessory structures, and I've explained this before, y'all heard me say this before. The reason that we don't allow accessory dwelling units, we call them accessory structures with living spaces, because we wanted to be consistent with our land use plan, low density. By allowing accessory dwelling units, you're allowing more quote unquote dwelling units per acre. So should the town ever want to pursue allowing accessory dwelling units, we'll most likely have to amend our land use plan as well.
A lot of localities will say that an accessory dwelling unit is not an additional dwelling unit for density purposes.
I don't think we want to say that here.
Why not? If we're looking for a path to allow them.
Oh, to allow them, sure. Wes, can I bother you to pull up 3694, one principal building? It's pretty simple here to understand. Only one principal building and its customary accessory building may hereafter be erected on any lot except as authorized in this article. My question on that was, if we are going down the road of ADUs and there's a shed out there, can you have an accessory dwelling unit in a shed?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Currently, well, you have to look into whether it's a building or a structure. That falls into play as well.
Well,
I mean, you'd probably have to address that, but they may have bigger issues in terms of the building code too.
a building, and this is revised from, I mean, these were the four definitions that we said we were going to send on to town council, and I'm assuming they're in place. But a building means any structure used or intended for supporting or sheltering any use or occupancy. So I would think that if you had a customary accessory building, which is defined as what, Wes? Accessory customary building. It would be like a pool house, a tennis court, stuff like that.
We define an accessory building.
Yeah. A subordinate building consisting of walls and a roof, the use of which is clearly incidental. Would it be possible for us to settle on putting a definition that defines accessory dwelling unit? because there's a pretty good one in one of these two bills. For the purposes of this section, the term accessory dwelling unit means an attached or detached residential structure that is used in connection with or that is accessory to a primary single-family dwelling and that has less total square footage than the primary single-family dwelling. Their definition. We don't have a definition for accessory dwelling unit. We have a definition for accessory structure. We have a definition for dwelling unit. We have a definition for dwelling, but we don't have one for accessory dwelling unit. Could we agree that we might want to at least define what an accessory dwelling unit is? Not saying that we should jump on board and go one way or the other, but
I think that starts to make that definition. I think there was one also that had to do with fully being able to bathe. and eat.
with what?
With having capacity for people to bathe, to sleep, to eat, to cook their foods or something like that.
Right.
It went a little bit in depth as far as the uses and so.
Well, the dwelling unit was defined. If Wes can bring that up, what you're talking about is the definition of dwelling unit.
I mean,
Okay.
I'm struggling to try to understand why do we need to define it if we're not going to use the term in some zoning? I mean, the purpose of defining it is to scope
Yeah.
what it is you're going to do about it. But if we haven't decided what we're going to do about
Exactly.
it,
Well,
the definition is.
that's just part of the equation. I think first you got to define what it is. And then, I mean, I jotted down what I would like to see if we can agree on Wes moving forward at some point in time with a ZTA that addresses what we're talking about here. The top of my list would be to define what an ADU is.
I mean, I think I would default to what I said at the beginning. It sounded as though, well, one, we presented the council with a request regarding affordable housing. And two, there was an expressed interest in perhaps addressing accessory dwelling units. I'd like to see whether or not there's any initiative that they wish to take out of that. And if so, then we should be engaged to some degree in that, not to mention, other stakeholders. And if not, I just would hate to see us trying to do something in a vacuum when we just,
And I think we agreed that we weren't going to take any action until there was a public hearing about it, because the public definitely needs to be involved in, the decision-making process. But let me read down what I feel like a potential ZTA coming out of all this would be. The first one would be to put accessory dwelling unit in as a definition and basically get rid of the bedroom or cooking in the bedroom. So define what an ADU is. And then I would like to see some specificity on the proximity to the principal dwelling. I would like to see us address setback requirements and have them remain as they are for the principal dwelling, which is currently 15, 15, 25, 25. And then address additional parking, which is kind of questionable at this point, whether we can require additional parking if we
You
go.
can't require additional septic, how are you going to require additional parking?
You can require septic to meet the occupancy
Yeah.
of all
The
structures.
permitted occupancy or the what's in place septic wise is pretty easy to find, but the legislature's saying, no, you cannot do, any increased parking requirements,
I
but
misunderstood that. I thought they did, that we had.
and then, to finish off, I would, like to address, what is heated and living area defined as? Is it defined as a potential bedroom in an accessory dwelling unit or, for septic capacity?
Yeah, all this
I'm not sure. But I think septic capacity and how it's treated in an accessory dwelling unit, it's based on bedrooms, basically. But you could build a workshop, but yet it could be an accessory dwelling unit. I don't know.
Well, no, because your definition would state that it wasn't.
Yeah. But
What else do you have?
what I'm hearing from Michael is, you were at the meeting, I saw, part of your presentation. I didn't see it all because I'd seen it previous, but I didn't catch Matt zeroing in on what his thoughts were. What exactly would you suggest based on what you heard from council?
Well, they had some questions and they had questions. I don't know that they actually made any statements regarding our particular request because it was simply a report from us via me to them. It was not something on their agenda for action.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Mr. Neal's comment was just during council member statements towards the end of the meeting. I think, I don't know what path they'll take, if any. I know that there was an interest in looking at, a small area plan for the commercial corridor and whether or not affordable housing has, factors into that. If the town pursues that, that's certainly one angle, but I would prefer to see if council wishes to evaluate and study housing and discuss ADUs on a larger scale before we initiate some type of amendment, absent that discussion.
Wes, you got any suggestions on moving forward with, getting on the radar with town council to possibly schedule, I don't know, it could be, a workshop or I don't know. I don't know which way to roll with this, but we started down this road in 2021 and it's 2024, and outside of a few definitions, it's status quo from where it was in 2021.
There's the possibility of requesting a special meeting or a joint meeting with the town council, the planning board and the council, and y'all can discuss your ideas and thoughts. They can discuss their ideas and thoughts and see if you all can come up with the direction you all want to head.
I think they look at us as the planning. In other words, I think we got to initiate and put together some well-thought, planned, whether it's a definition or where we're headed, and then, bring that to them to come join us in that workshop. But I believe we got to do the gut work first.
Yeah,
And then,
and it's certainly within the planning board's right to initiate this rather than have it come from town council that we work on it. So, that's what we're doing right now.
I agree, but except that if we're completely off base and it's not something they, a direction,
sure.
We're tilting at windmills at that point. So
Well,
my
maybe,
suggestion would be, maybe maybe based on the discussions that have already been had, they intend to provide some feedback and responses to address affordable housing or ADUs.
Mhm.
Two, if that's not their intent, maybe it is a preliminary conversation to talk about, just like we have here, not to do a significant amount of legwork, but where is their mind with respect to this?
Well, maybe hearing that, I will make contact with the mayor and, try to read the temperature of the rest of the council. And who knows, might, lay this on the table with her and the mayor pro tem and Wes and I, and maybe one of y'all could jump in and, we'll beat it around a little bit. And that always seems to work pretty well. We get a consensus about what, the thoughts are from town council side. They're the elected officials. We just, show up. But anyway, let's do that for now. But I definitely want to get to a point where we have something legislatively in our code. We've been knocking this around, and it's coming. It might not come full bore like David Owens has said, but it's coming. And I'm not opposed to having them, but I do want to be able to regulate them as much as we possibly can as a community. And if it works out that it does some good with, some type of housing shortage, then so be it. But I don't think that's going to be our primary focus. Anyhow, I'll make contact with her and we'll stay tuned on that. All right.
Can we do this?
New business.
That's kills all the birds.
Wes, I'll not get you to read out what new business is. We'll just roll down it if that's okay. If everybody will pull up that ZTA that Wes got to us.
Yes, sir. However you'd like to proceed, either that, or I can go through and hit on what the proposed changes are, however you want to proceed.
Yeah, let's do that. Everybody got ZTA 2402 in front of them.
And that's 2404.
I'm sorry, 20.
Staff report said 2402, but the bottom of the actual ZTA does say 2404. That was my mistake.
Okay. All right. Well, in Wes's analysis, it's basically plan unit developments as special use. Bitcoin mining is in there, and lot disturbance stormwater management permit is in there as well, that language. So let's flip over there. We go to get past the whereases and go to page 2, section 36-171, lot disturbance and stormwater management. Very first line says subject to requirements of GS 160D-1110E if applicable in all town zoning districts. Keyword all. I think we talked about this before, that it is in all zoning districts there. You go over to page 3, number 4, line 26. In addition to the provisions above in the general commercial district is struck, and it would be in all zoning districts. No removal of trees greater than 6 inches in diameter measured at 4.5 feet above the ground within a front, side, or rear setback on any unimproved lot shall be undertaken prior to the issuance of a lot disturbance stormwater management permit by the zoning administrator. So we are, rather than it being limited to the general commercial district, it is switched out to all zoning districts. Any questions of Wes on that, discussions? Anybody?
I mean, if discussion, I think I said at the last meeting, you know, my biggest issue with it is that for residential, so for commercial, it ensures that someone's not going to do tree removal for the regulated trees prior to coming before us for site plan review. Because they wouldn't be able to get that land disturbance permit. And so we would be looking at the property as it exists prior to the proposed development. But for residential, it's not precluding them from doing anything because all they need to do is get a permit and then they could apply for a permit to remove all the trees from a piece of property. And there's no review. There's no standards for review of that permit application for that residential piece of property. You know, they fill it out, they pass it across the counter, they've got the permit. There's no standards. And so I have concerns about just making people fill out a piece of paper just for the sake of filling out a piece of paper, that there's nothing that Wes or the town is actually reviewing on that. I mean, am I missing something here? Is there something that you would be reviewing as this is drafted for that residential parcel?
With respect to tree removal, the only standard is the 6 inches in diameter and measured 4.5 feet above the ground.
Right.
But the other applicable provisions of lot disturbance, stormwater management, are the 1.5 inch stormwater retention. But with respect to this proposed amendment, there are no standards. We would have to confirm that, you know, the trees that are being removed that they're requesting to remove meet that standard, but that's it.
But they're almost acknowledging that by making the application anyway.
They could say that we are removing all trees on the property.
Right.
And then at that point, there really is nothing to.
Right. So I'm concerned about requiring somebody to get a permit just for the sake of getting a permit.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but why, if we're gonna require it in the commercial process, wouldn't we require it in the residential?
Because I think under the commercial process, there are standards for evaluation of site plan, there are standards for evaluation and discretion on a special use permit that warrant review and warrant some pause to say, what does the existing vegetation look like on a piece of property? What does that look like in relation to the proposed development? But we're not saying any of that for residential. So that would be my concern about at least part one of this. And I fully believe, I think there should be instances where the removal of certain trees is not permitted. I don't think it goes far enough.
I'm satisfied with how far it goes, because I truly believe, and I can cite some examples of, homes in Southern Shores that have been completely stripped of every tree on the lot. And the house now looks like it should be in Home and Garden magazine. I mean,
But did they replant them?
Yeah.
Right, exactly. So
But
I've written
Yeah.
regulations that say you can't remove trees from the tree yard, the boundary, the perimeter, except for you have to submit a tree preservation and replacement plan. So let's say you remove a tree hold on real quick.
Yeah.
Let's say you remove a tree with a diameter of 10 inches. So you have to replant minimum 2-inch size trees, 2-inch caliper trees to make up that 10 inches. So you plant 5 2-inch caliper trees, people are going to do that generally anyway. in some cases, you're gonna be able to preserve some of those trees. There's other ways to do this that actually do something rather than just making people push a piece of paper across the desk to do what they intend to do anyway.
I
Can
think,
we do it with a sketch plan? If we require it on commercial, can we have a sketch plan on residential that would show the trees?
I mean, I think it has to be more thought out than that in terms of what the intent of this actually is. Because just, my sense is it's not gonna preclude somebody from clearing that lot.
I think it adds a layer of the process that keeps people from taking out trees in the setback until they actually begin the building process. Once the building process begins, permitted building process, building permit and so forth, if it's the prerogative of the homeowner to take every tree out, he's worried about tree coming through the roof. He's worried about the shade. Mr. Stone here doesn't like, trees because it's doom and gloom. I mean,
But he's not required to keep anything under this. He can, if Mr. Stone doesn't like his trees, he can just come and apply for a permit and take down the same ones that he was gonna take down anyway.
We're talking about the initial lot disturbance process where people come in, they try to get a sight line in there, they take out trees that are bigger than 6 inches in diameter, 4.5 feet up, and they don't respect the next door neighbor's, property. And I mean, we're adding 3 words. We're substituting 3 words rather
Right.
than it being only in the general commercial district. It is also a requirement in all town and zoning districts. It makes it consistent with the very first sentence in 36-171. It says in all zoning districts, no grading, filling, or other alteration of topography. So let's be consistent.
Okay, I guess I may be missing something. I don't understand what it is going to solve for. So today, I want to remove trees. I go out and remove them. Under this amendment, I want to remove trees. There we go. And now I've permitted it. Except for commercial, this permit can't be issued, but under residential, it can.
Well, are you saying that we need to make it so that you absolutely can't remove trees until you have a building permit?
Maybe we need to define that we live in a maritime forest. I mean, I think we have, in some fashion, have to get it across to people that it's unique and that the reason it's still here and still a maritime forest is that we have to protect what we have in sense of what's growing. And obviously, if it's diseased and it's going to fall down, yes, you got to take it down. But is this what we're trying to do? I mean, are we trying to protect this maritime forest that's here? If not, yeah, come in and clear lot and get rid of it.
This doesn't do that. This doesn't protect that.
And I understand, the doom and gloom because it's shady and everything, but you can choose to live somewhere else. You don't have to buy a lot and live in Southern Shores in a maritime forest. Somehow, if you choose to live there, then with that choice comes the perseverance or of the trees, of keeping this status quo. How do you manage to get that across?
Well, I think that might be,
Too much?
yeah, I mean, it's too much regulation as far as I'm concerned for the people that, don't want to have trees, and then the builders that are trying to work around an ordinance that is tough to work around. I don't know. I just don't see any harm in making it consistent and saying in all zoning districts, just like it says right there, in all town zoning districts.
I don't disagree with you, but I do agree with Michael, I think this is just, it's really a first step. If we want to have any effect, this could be a first step.
Well, I tend to agree, and if there's more interest in doing a more comprehensive, tree ordinance situation down the line, I guess we can entertain that. But I mean, we're not doing that with this. We're just saying for consistency, it ought to be in all town zoning districts, both pages.
Didn't Tony say he wanted to volunteer for that effort?
But can I ask a question? What's the purpose of the setback? I mean, the purpose of the setback is, in some senses, to assure the neighbors that you will not impinge on their property, right? I got a setback and you have a setback, and that's, good neighbors, good fences make good neighbors is conceptually, right? So if you say that a property owner can clear cut up to the property line, even though they're not going to build up to the property line, you are in some senses impinging upon the rights and expectations of the neighbor. That's the issue, it seems to me. And nobody's saying that inside the setback, in the building plat kind of area where you put the building, they can't clear cut it. They have to clear cut it if there are trees where the building is going to go. It's a vacant lot or something like that. But it should be, I agree with Michael. I mean, it should be that this bureaucratic thing should be driven by some objective, right? And all of us are property owners. We all can associate ourselves with something that helps neighbors be respectful of their neighbors. And maybe that's what the purpose of this provision is.
Well, I don't think that saying to keep the 15-foot buffer between the lot line and your house, that if you look at the lot line, the tree on your side of that lot line is yours.
Yes, of course.
And you should be entitled, if you don't want it falling on your house or you don't want shade there, you should be entitled to not have that tree in place. I mean, I'm just, that's where I'm at. And if we're trying on, somewhere that's built out to 90% to reinvent the wheel on the tree ordinance, we're way out of the realm. But I mean, within reason, I think this thing hits it okay. I mean, I'm not under no illusion that we could regulate that you couldn't take down a tree or eliminate a tree on your property. I don't think, I mean, now we're behind up here now, and I mean, there's public comment afterwards.
This is,
Yeah.
we're speaking specifically about unimproved lots. That's what's that's what you're talking about here. Once you build your house and move in, cut them off.
Am I saying that? I'm saying it should be,
I mean,
basically,
this
you're right,
ordinance- I mean, this
unfortunately.
ordinance is only about a vacant lot.
that is trying to get a lot disturbance permit. And I mean, I've had two new houses, one in front and one beside me this year. I've seen it, and I was a builder. I know what the score is, and you got to be able to get some strings in there and figure out where that house is going. But to let a contractor come in and just demolish that for a sight line without getting a lot disturbance permit, I don't agree with. And I don't see any harm in scratching through just requiring it in the general commercial district. Do it in all zoning districts for consistency.
Well, we don't allow people to take everything out without a lot of disturbance. You have to have one.
Sure.
If you're gonna move the sand, but you can go in and cut some trees down if you want, as long as you're not disturbing the land, right?
You can limit them. You can, but I see no harm in scratching through 3 words, the general commercial, and substituting it for all town zoning districts. All right, so that's one prong in this thing.
Let's where's the change for planned unit development coming from? Is that something we discussed before?
You all did not, but this is coming from staff.
Okay.
February 6, 2024 council meeting, town council directed staff to draft amendments to modernize the town code. And then reviewing the planned unit development language, it's contradictory. In one part, it says it's permitted use by right. Another part, it says it's special use, and it refers to more than one occasion following the special use permit process. So I think we're clearing up that contradictory.
Where does it?
And since it's following the special use permit procedure, then it takes out the extra planning board review and refers to, there's one where it says a public hearing may be held. If we're following the special use permit process, a public hearing shall be held. So this is an effort to try to clean up and make the plan unit development requirements, the language, the review and approval process consistent with what the special use permit process requires.
So mainly, there was more emphasis on PUDs with the special use language than with the permitted use?
Yes,
Okay.
I believe so.
Well, we're going to dial into that in a second, but we're going to whiz by prohibited uses in all districts. And on page 6, number 13, Bitcoin mining would be added. Everybody okay with that?
I have one suggestion. After looking at this a little bit further, if we are going to recommend something similar, then it probably shouldn't be Bitcoin mining. It should probably be something like cryptocurrency mining or something similar. Because I think Bitcoin is like one
sure.
part, one
Yeah.
kind of cryptocurrency. So if there are other different
Right,
kinds of currencies other than Bitcoin, then they would not be subject to this prohibition.
Think we can agree on that?
Is there a definition that you haven't proposed?
I don't know, sir.
So we'll just, rather than Bitcoin, it'll be cryptocurrency. Okay, that was the easy one out of the bunch. We turn over to page 8, section 36, 263, plan unit development concept. The first paragraph is completely struck. It's submissive and aspirational, but it doesn't carry any weight, and I'm assuming that's why it got pulled out, or was it because of 160D?
Well, no, mostly part of it, but mostly because if it's following the special use permit process, a public hearing shall be held.
Yeah. Okay.
Public hearing would be mandatory. Quasi judicial public hearing would be mandatory.
Right.
Quasi judicial hearing.
So on line 15, page 8, where the expiration of time limits on the PUD, this is all planning board agenda stuff. the three things that the planning board shall review the circumstances and recommend to town council that 1, 2, and 3 occur. Anybody got anything on that? Page 8? All right, page 9, excuse me. Starting around, what, item C, sketch plans. Everybody
So,
see that? Sketch plans may be drawn in such a manner as to minimize initial expense and encourage sufficient design flexibility to accommodate required changes without undue hardship to the developer. And I think that for whatever reason, the town council wanted in another sketch plan review for a special use permit, they wanted it to be optional. But yet, it speaks to it, and I think that encapsulates why we're asking for a sketch plan review, is to help developers before they get too far down the road and spend a lot of money on plans.
I totally agree. I don't think there's any
Anyway,
legal charge. to be made.
but item D is struck. The developer may submit preliminary plats in lieu of a sketch plan development plan. So that's not in there, period. And the sketch plans remain in, which is, to me, is good news. Wes, what is on line 28, item A? What is a pre-application conference as it would relate to us in the planning board?
Only thing I know is what's in this language here.
Is that from many years ago?
It's been there
A long time?
for a while, yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. I got a big circle around it with a what and a question mark.
The pre-application conference,
Yeah,
that's the sketch plan proposal.
that's what I would think.
If you
Yeah,
go
well, that's what
back-
it says. That's what
yeah.
it says. That's what
Yeah.
it says in there. It says it's including sketch plan and report and currently or preliminary subdivision plat. So pre-application conference would just be limited to what's in this language, as I was saying.
And they may elect to do that or not. right?
Correct.
Anybody got anything else on page 9? And let's go to page 10. Wes, I'm gonna get you to pull up something for me, if you would, in the section 24 dash 27, powers and duties of the planning board.
I don't know if it's been codified, so I'll have to bring up
I think I
the
saw it in there.
24-27.
Yes,
Yeah, it has not,
A6.
it hasn't been codified, so I can pull up the ZTA that should be posted.
This basically, you'll remember it, in the ZTA, where the legislature per 160D said that the planning board is just, holds a forum for discussion.
That's commercial.
wasn't it in 2401? CTA, that 24-page ZTA? Yeah, that's it.
Trying to make it bigger, but you can't see anything.
Item A6.
Yeah, this is it. To prepare, review, maintain, monitor, facilitate,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
coordinate.
right there.
Which number?
Number 3, to develop and recommend, oh, no, keep going. It's 6, number 6. Yeah, to provide a preliminary forum. Can you highlight that? Thank you. I'm a little fuzzy on item E, on page 10, line 9. It says, as required by the terms of this article, the planning board shall forward its recommendations to the town council in accordance with special use permits. Doesn't that kind of fly in the face of what that says? I think it
Where are
does.
you, on page 10?
Yeah, page 10, item 9, line 9, it's E, which starts off as required by the terms of this article.
I mean,
It's,
I don't think it's contrary, though. I mean, I think we would still forward the recommendation. They just can't.
well, but it's a special use. I mean, we're talking
Sure.
about a special use, which would be a quasi judicial hearing, right?
Yep.
So we're saying it in one place that we don't get into those recommendations, and the town council, in fact, can't be used as a basis for their decisions. I mean, it's,
I don't read it that way.
It's correct. They can't use, you can still make recommendations, but they cannot use it as a basis.
so you don't think it's ambiguous what,
They come to their, exactly like Mr. McClendon said.
well, yeah,
They come to their own conclusions.
yeah. Provided that no part of the forum or recommendation may be used as a basis for town council decisions.
Independent from their own hearing.
Yeah.
I mean, I would hope that council would receive the recommendation from the planning board and say, that is a point of concern. Let me ask the applicant
Yeah.
about that. Let me
Yeah.
understand that.
But they can't use what the planning board recommends per se in their decision.
Right, they have to derive
Right.
their own, right, correct.
So is everybody okay with that not being ambiguous? I when I first read it, I went, yeah. We, planning board lost a lot of, control in a quasi judicial process, and that being it. I mean, we're only allowed to provide a temporary forum, a preliminary forum.
If I read it as why bother?
Well, I mean, truthfully,
Yeah.
the planning board could always send somebody to the hearing and relay the planning board's recommendation as part of the hearing, and then it becomes.
Yeah, and that's, you can do that in public. They don't have to, or they won't be able to use your recommendation word for word, but
Right.
they hear what you say. Yeah, you're right there. But yeah, it stripped a lot of that 160D, took a lot of meat out of what the planning board can do in a quasi judicial hearing. I mean, when I first saw it, I went, why are we even here? I mean, how does the town council get their information?
I think the intent of it is to make sure that the planning board doesn't become the bully pulpit.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
sure.
decision
It's the
maker.
elected,
Decision
it's the
maker.
elected
Yeah.
officials that are
Right.
required to come to these conclusions.
Presumably, there must be some public purpose to having a planning board look at all of this. And to do that for the council, and the council gets informed by it, but it can't use it as a basis for the
Mhm.
decision,
Yeah.
which is a legal
Just
term,
because
I
they
guess.
said
Well, just as long as y'all don't feel like it's contradictory to each other, I'm good. Anybody else have anything beyond that? Because from 23, line 23 on down, it's all been taken out. Anybody? Page 11 is just more striking. And that's it. Wes, have you got anything to add
No, sir.
to what we're talking about here?
No, sir.
Well, I'm going to make a motion that we approve or recommend sending this to town council for their approval, ZTA 24-01, as written and talked about.
Just a minor correction. It's 2404 and it's
Yep.
2404.
Once again, I'll make that motion stated. I recommend sending ZTA 24-04 to town council as written, with one minor correction, the crypto.
Cryptocurrency.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Charlie. Any discussion?
I wouldn't vote in favor of the motion just because of the amendments to part one, and I don't think they really accomplish any identified objective.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor of my motion seconded by Charlie, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? One. Okay. All right. Well, you guys have stayed here long enough. Who wants to go first? Please step up to the podium.
Yes, sir.
And Wes is going to hit that light on you too.
I see he's got his finger on the button.
Yeah.
Jeez, a whiz. I'm not going to be that long, trust me. Again, Richard Filling, I live at 131 Crooked Back Loop. I just, regarding, of course, the tree clearing, I believe that what I hear is the general consensus that this is nothing more than applying for a permit and a piece of paper to pass on and allow tree clearing in the setback zone. That's what I'm hearing. That's the general consensus, but that's not what you really want. Michael pretty much made that statement, correct me if I'm wrong, that it's nothing more than, okay, I have a parcel of property that I just bought. Here's my permit application. I'm going to tree clear it. Okay, here's your permit. Go do it. I don't believe that's the intent here. I honestly don't, and I truly hope that that's not the intent. My one colleague here, I agree with him that to some degree on what can and cannot be cleared. I have a tree that sits on the corner of my property. It's in the setback. I don't want to cut it. It provides me great shade. At the same time, I have some concern. We have a hurricane. I wouldn't be able to cut that. I do, and it's in the setback, but I'm not going to. Ms. Jen, we live in a maritime forest. That's clear cut. And that's the bottom line. We should maintain that. That's why we have it. That's all I can say about that. Mr. Charles mentioned that regarding respecting your neighbor's wishes. That's the reason there's setbacks, to provide that buffer or protection between you and your neighbor. I mean, what's your greatest thing that they always say, fences make great neighbors. So do trees. They do. I really believe that, I think it's in the best interest to pursue it a little bit further. Apply for a permit, identify what can and cannot be cut. Endangered trees, take them out. Pines really don't provide a whole lot of usefulness, just for the most part. Our oaks, our live oaks, our maritime forests. Right on time.
Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and like I said, please send us an email, copy the
Yes,
town
sir.
council, and do some bullet points. And, they'll listen, we'll listen. I mean, we've never even had close to a tree ordinance in Southern Shores. This has been talked about. Tony DiBernardo can tell you how many times he's tried to run one through, but
I'll be glad.
this is a decent start, but I mean, we've got work to do. So,
And I'll be glad to throw my name out there if there's a side committee that needs to put together a tree bill of some nature. I have done that.
okay, well, thank you.
I have a lot of experience with it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, when is the next town council meeting? I should know that. I don't.
First Monday.
August
No, third.
6th.
Third Monday.
August 6th,
August 6th?
Oh, town council.
Thank you.
Sorry.
first Tuesday of the month.
Yeah, I missed it. I was away. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Lonnie.
I think the first thing that needs to be done is the correction of y'all's assumption of what the setbacks were established for. The original setback within Southern Shores was 10 feet. That was not for a vegetative buffer. That was for supposedly fire protection, to be able to separate the houses and to allow the firemen space to go between houses if they needed to get to the rear. Back in the 80s, I believe it was, people were building more on wax myrtle and other areas, and they were getting upset because the oceanfront homeowners were able to build on their 80-foot width with 10-foot setbacks. So they used the excuse of more space for the fire department, but really it was for all those other people that were in the dunes at the time, so that they would have a little more of an ocean glimpse. Yes, we live in a maritime forest, but if you have any clue as to what this place was like, there's more than twice the vegetation here now as there ever was. Part of the reason for that vegetation growth, or a large portion, is the fact of development and the houses being built, blocking the salt spray and mist from hitting the bushes and such and burning them out and burning their leaves off and killing the plants. I mean, I've seen many places on oceanfront, for example, where there were live oaks and other stuff. A house would get torn down, ocean burns it up just like that. The only reason trees in this area are so high is because the continuation from coming from the oceanfront this way of structures and other brush blocking the salt mist and spray. And that's the only reason that the trees and everything on the west side of the dune have grown so high, is because everything has been cut down. I think some of these houses, no one really wants to clear cut the lot. But I think a lot of these, it's nice to have some of these green yards spread throughout this community. I mean, it's nice to see some grass from time to time. And quite frankly, I think it needs to go the opposite way. And instead of addressing the lots, I think you should more likely address the roads and being able to get through them, especially if you wanted to move out of their neighborhood with a moving van or truck, because it's not cut back 5 feet off the road or anything. You can't get through anymore. You can't, I mean, there's no view within this community anymore like it used to be. It used to be fantastic, go through and see things. Right now, you just got a bunch of, I'm not gonna say the word, just growing up everywhere and not being controlled in any manner. And as far as trees, I also knew a girl that got crippled because of hitting one of these trees that was really close to the road. She lost control, she hit the tree. You know, she was crippled the rest of her life. So stuff happens due to vegetation. And like I said, sooner or later, something will happen to somebody in town. Hopefully not, but.
Thank you, Mike. All right. Planning board member comments. Robert?
I don't have any at this time.
Michael?
Nope.
Jane?
I think we're going in the right direction. We're talking about it.
We did. We talked about it tonight. I think we got more to do. Charlie?
No additional comments.
Okay. Well, Wes, what did you got for us announcement wise?
The next scheduled regular meeting is August 19th, and town staff doesn't currently have anything lined up for you all at this point.
Okay, well, beyond that, wish Tony healing. He's been a little sick here lately. Not quite sure what's going on with him, but I texted him today and haven't heard back. And want to wish Ed Lawler a happy birthday. So he's got a good excuse.
Yeah.
Good. Anyway, I'll make a motion that we adjourn this meeting. Can I get a second?
I second.
Jan seconds. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tony's got
Just
some-